All right, good morning, or whatever time is you're watching this. Paul Miller and Tim Ball, and we're talking about continue our conversation about hard questions for Christians, and we're focusing. These are going to be about stuff from the Old Testament. So we're going to go in order through the Old Testament when some of these questions come up. Let's see. So the first one was, where do you think the Garden of Eden was located? Well, what do you think, Tim?
Wherever I feel happiest. Um, that's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of people think that it was somewhere in the Iran-Iraq area down there. In that, if you look at how oil is produced, our gas and oil is produced, it's from forests that have been, has been like taken into underground,
Yeah.
and it's vast majorities of forests that have been taken and turned into fossil fuels. And when you look at that particular area, it's insanely rich with fossil fuels, with
Hmm.
oil. Oil comes from organic substances that have gone underground, and then however the process makes oil ferments or whatever. And we can almost see that, and sometimes in our backyard when we have a compost pile, your compost pile starts turning into gas.
Hmm.
Poof. So so I'm thinking that it's somewhere in there. I mean, that's not something that I really need to dwell on where Eden is, um, because I know that there's a lot of people that postulate that it's somewhere in the Middle East.
Yeah, one of the things that the Bible talks about is it mentions four rivers in the Garden of Eden, and two of those being the Tigris and Euphrates, and those are pretty well-known rivers that flow through, like you said, Iraq and Kuwait and that area today. So a lot of people say, oh, for sure that it would have been somewhere in there. Um, of course, Noah just could have named those rivers that he already knew when he landed. So maybe it was somewhere else. Um, but like you said, I think that's a good point. Where the Garden of Eden is, it doesn't really matter. It'd be We're not going to be able to find it again because it was destroyed by the flood, and God kicked us out, kicked our great grandparents out when they sinned. Um, what we can look forward to is God welcoming us back into paradise in the last day, and when the world ends, creating a new heaven and new earth, and living in that together in that perfection that in the way He created it, when it was all very good.
Very cool.
Let's see. So what happened to the Garden of Eden? Well, we just kind of talked about that. It's destroyed in the flood. So the angel that was guarding it with a flaming sword probably got to go back to heaven at the very least before the flood, maybe sooner before that.
Look at how common the story of the Garden of Eden is in mankind's history. There's been lots of phenomenally fantastic places that people lived that those people screwed up and then they were destroyed or taken over by other people, and now we don't even know. Sometimes when you hear of the turn of the archaeologist Spade, we find a city underneath a city underneath a city, a civilization underneath a civilization underneath a civilization. So the common sense way of thinking about the Garden of Eden is that it is just simply was taken away. Remember, they were driven out of the Garden of Eden, so it ceased to exist for its purpose.
Yeah. Let's see. Vinny asked also, why did people live longer in Bible times? When you look at Adam and Noah's family tree in the book of Genesis, you see Methuselah living to be, almost 1,000 years old. Um, why did people live so long back then?
I think that's one of the simplest things I've ever seen to answer. When you look at most of our medicines come from plants. Most of our medicines come from plants. Aspirin comes from the bark of a willow tree. So you have people that are living off the land, living from what God had given us, all those plants to eat. And those plants have medicinal purposes, even to this day. Even to this day, plants are medicinal in many ways, including our health. Look at what we do to ourselves today. We eat a lot of things we shouldn't be eating, and therefore we don't take care of, we don't take care of ourselves. And most people, by the way, don't realize that when people live very short lifetimes, they usually passed away from dental disease.
Mm,
So when you're eating a lot of things you shouldn't, then when you're, let's say, you're Tutankhamun's father who died from a abscessed tooth, you're rich and famous, and you can eat lots of sugary foods and whatnot, not taking care of your teeth because you think you're a god, and all of a sudden you get a toothache. That toothache turns into a rotted tooth. That rotted tooth turns into an abscess. That abscess turns into sepsis in your system, and you're a goner. So I think the reason people live longer, I mean, I'm just thinking common sense wise,
mm,
is that they took care of themselves better. They walked everywhere. They walked everywhere. They were completely healthy. They ate, things of the land, and those things were, as God provided, very healthy for them. And then as we became more modernized and we started doing things for ourselves, we neglected God's good rules and regulations, and then we still do it to this day. We do it to this day. You look at people who are unhealthy, it's because they're living off of Twinkies and Coca-Cola every day. They're not living off of healthy diets. So I think common sense just says it's healthier diets, healthier living, and the fact that they had to survive in ways that we couldn't even imagine.
Yeah, this is one of those questions where, to be fair, a lot of these questions are where we don't know the answer for sure,
That's true.
and that's okay.
If I said common sense,
Yeah.
Let's just think it out as common sense.
Another explanation I've heard before that I kind of really liked, taking a little bit more from relating it back to the story of Adam and Eve, is Adam and Eve got to eat from the tree of life. They got to eat from that tree that would have them live forever in that paradise, and perhaps since they got to eat from the tree of life, that stuck in their DNA a little bit longer. As the generations went down, you start to see people living not as long as those first generations under Adam and Eve. Maybe those people living for hundreds upon hundreds of years is that those vitamins from the tree of life still kicking around. Maybe.
Okay.
That's one explanation I heard. I thought, oh,
Makes
okay,
sense.
it makes sense. Do we know for sure? No, but some, like I said, some of these things is okay that we don't know for sure. Let's see. Gabe we could take a few of these Noah's Ark questions too. How many animals were on Noah's Ark? And then why does God have Noah use 2 of each animal? Why not more? From Mackenzie. And one of the things that is helpful for us to remember with the story of Noah's Ark is that God tells Noah to take 2 of each kind. And it doesn't mean 2 of each species necessarily. So perhaps, so there probably weren't 2 lions, 2 tigers, 2 leopards, 2 cheetahs. There were probably just 2 big cats. There wasn't a poodle and a wiener dog and a wolf. 2 of those each. There were probably just 2 dogs on the ark. And the ark was really, really big. It was the same amount of space as probably like, let's see, where do I have this number? 570 boxcars. And some good folks at let's see, at the Christian Apologetics and Research Ministry, they say, their predictions are so that they would need to take like about 7,400 mammals, 120,400 birds, 12,600 reptiles, and 5,000 amphibians, and that would probably take up about 319 of the 570 boxcars, which means there would have been plenty more room for all of the food for Noah's family, and find ways to get, and they would have to get rid of all that waste obviously too. Yeah, Noah and his family must have been busy taking care of those animals. God might have had the animals fall asleep on the ark too, like a hibernation thing. We don't know for sure, but we do know that God made it work, and God used the ark as a way to save and renew humanity.
That seems a good way of looking at it to me.
Yeah. Let's see. All right. The question about Abraham and Isaac. Was Isaac smiling at Abraham before he was going to be killed? I guess they saw it in a movie. So that this goes, fast forwards a while to the story of Abraham and Isaac. And Abraham's about to sacrifice Isaac. And was Isaac smiling?
No.
Probably not.
No. I mean, no, there's no question about it. In my humble opinion, I mean, we're all human beings. We've been human beings since God created human beings. I'm sure that Isaac was confused. what's going on here. Abraham is the person we need to focus on just as much as Isaac. Abraham was an incredible human being. He had a personality that thought of God as somebody that you could literally sit down and eat with and ask questions and ask him things that were very, very, very bright. I mean, when Abraham was approached by God and the two angels, Abraham had a relationship with God where they were sitting down and eating curds and whey. And then Abraham asked God some questions like, okay, you're going to go destroy this city. And he's thinking, well, my relative lives in that city. Would you destroy Sodom if there was 100 good people in Sodom? Would you destroy the 100 with the rest of the city? And God said, no. Well, what about 90? What about 80? What about 70? What about 60? When you look at how Abraham was dealt with by God, it's a really beautiful thing. Here's a guy who thought he could talk to God as a logical being. And of course, God is a logical being. And so when it comes to the question of was Isaac smiling, that might be in Hollywood, but I don't think my son Elijah would be smiling if I tied him up and I was gonna, had a knife above him. He'd be like, Dad, you're gonna go to prison. But God then saved Isaac. Isaac then became a great man. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the three pillars of the Abrahamic faith. Judaism is what we call it today. So I mean, obviously God had a purpose. Was Isaac smiling? Come on now.
Well, he was definitely probably pretty scared, especially, I think you're right. They probably more confused at first, and then once he gets Abraham ties, and yeah, something wrong is happening here. And, uh, and the great thing we have from that story is there's a sacrifice that gets substituted in, right? We have that ram that was caught in, in the thicket, and then, on Good Friday, we have our sacrifice with thorns, caught with thorns on its head, sacrificed for us to pay for our sins so we can have eternal life.
Next was one of my favorite.
Next one, let's see. Why did God ask Moses to let his people free? Well, I think we got some Moses ones. We'll save the Moses ones for next time because it looks like a few of those. So there's look forward to seeing those. Thank you for the good questions as always, guys, and we'll see you later.
Take care.